Hello, boys and girls. I'm out on the road today traveling. I am not driving while I'm shooting this video. However, I'm a passenger in the car, so don't be worried about safety. Today, we're going to dive into chapter 13, Understanding Reagan. If you would, turn to page 164 and follow along with me. The next morning, Honey came down to the hollow right after breakfast. She was so excited that she burst right into the kitchen without knocking. "Oh, I'm sorry," she cried, her cheeks aflame with embarrassment when she realized what she had done. "Sorry for what?" demanded Trixie, who was alone in the kitchen. "For forgetting to knock," Honey explained. "I don't know what's come over me lately, Trixie," she giggled. "I seem to have forgotten all the good manners Miss Lefferts taught me." "Pooh," said Trixie impatiently. "I don't know who Miss Lefferts is or was, but I think you would have been awfully silly to knock when you could see me right through the screen door. People in this country don't bother much about knocking anyway. We usually open the door, poke our heads inside, and yell, 'Yoo-hoo!'" Honey's giggle changed into a loud laughter. "What's so funny?" Trixie brought the breakfast cups to the sink and frowned at Honey. Oh, Honey chortled. "If anybody did that in New York City, why—" Oh, she interrupted herself, still shaking with laughter. "You couldn't, anyway. Not in the apartment house we lived in. Even if you managed to sneak by the doorman and the elevator boy, you couldn't open a door and poke your head inside. People in New York always keep their doors locked. At least people who live in our apartment did." "Sounds like a prison," Trixie said, frowning. "It was, sort of," Honey admitted. "I mean, I used to ride up and down in the elevator day after day with the same people, and they never spoke to me, even though we were neighbors, living on the same floor. Sometimes they would smile, but as for yelling, 'Yoo-hoo!'" she went off into gales of laughter. Trixie couldn't help laughing too. Finally, she sobered. "What you mean is that we've been neighbors in a big city, that if we'd been neighbors in a big city, we might never have met?" Honey shook her head up and down. "And wouldn't that have been awful? Maybe not for you, but for me." "For me too," Trixie said empathetically. "I have lots of friends who live in Sleepyside, but I hardly ever see them during the summer. They seem to forget that I'm alive when school closes. And the funny thing is, Honey," she said frankly, "although I've known those girls since we started in kindergarten together, I don't like any of them half as much as I like you." Now I'm at the top of page 166 if you've lost your place. Honey gulped and looked as though she were going to go from laughter to tears. You, she stammered, and then quickly recovered her poise. "I just love you and Jim too. I wish you could have been with us yesterday on our ride. He's simply marvelous." "I bet he is," Trixie said. "Tell me all about it while I wash these dishes." "Let me help." Honey grabbed a dish towel off the rack and pulled a tall stool to the sink. "Oh, I forgot. Reagan sent Bobby a present." She reached into the pocket of her jeans and brought out a small box. When she lifted the cover, Trixie couldn't help letting out a little yell of surprise. The box was filled to the brim with tiny plastic horses, black ones and red ones and yellow ones. Some were trotting, some were galloping, and some were rearing with manes and tails flowing. "I never saw anything so cute in my life," Trixie cried. "They must have cost a fortune. Bobby will adore them. It was darling of Reagan to remember him." "That's Reagan for you," Honey said, carefully slipping the box back into her pocket. "He loves kids of all ages. One reason is because he didn't have a very happy childhood himself, I guess. He doesn't say much about it, but I couldn't help getting the impression that he had a pretty hard time while he was growing up." "Maybe that's why he's so good to us, too," Trixie said, as she handed Honey another plate. Mrs. Belden appeared then with a tray full of dishes which she had just carried down from Bobby's room. "Good morning, Honey," she said. "I'm glad you dropped in. Wouldn't you like to run up and say hello to Bobby? It would cheer him up a lot. I've just given him a bath and dressed him in clean pajamas. He's ready for visitors." "I'd love to," Honey said enthusiastically. I have a present for him from Reagan. She darted off. Trixie took the tray from her mother and said, I'll do these. Honey will help. She'll help with the gardening too, I know. We won't leave until all the chores are done, Moms. Well, so now she's getting a little bit more responsible, would you say, than she was from the beginning of the book? We see some improvements, don't we? All right, let's keep reading. Well, thank you, Trixie, Mrs. Belden said, sinking tiredly into the nearest chair. Keeping Bobby quietly in bed is a full-time job, but I want you to have fun, too. Do whatever you think is most important in the garden. Then you and Honey run along and forget about chores until lunchtime. She gathered up her knitting bag, some magazines, and went back upstairs. In a minute, Honey joined Trixie in the kitchen. Bobby is so cute, she said enviously. I'd give anything in the world for a little brother like that, and an older brother like Jim would be marvelous too. He's really an expert horseman. He rides like a centaur. I mean, when he swings into the saddle, it looks as though he and the horse were one. Jupiter behaved like a lamb yesterday, and you know Jupe. I certainly do, Trixie admitted ruefully. I suppose Jim rode him with a snaffle bit and had him eating out of his hand. Well, not exactly, Honey said, but Jim never had to use the curb. He talked to Jupe for a while before he mounted him, and they seemed to understand each other perfectly. Huh? Then we left the woods and rode across the country through the fields, jumping fences and little brooks. It was the best ride I ever had. I wish you could have been with us. I don't know how to jump yet, Trixie reminded her, so I couldn't have kept up with you. Am I going to have another lesson today? This afternoon, Honey said, and be careful when you talk to Reagan. Even though I gave both horses a rub-down yesterday when I brought them back, I think Reagan suspects something. Both saddle blankets were soaked with sweat, you know, and I couldn't do anything about that. But let Reagan think that you and I had a short ride in the corral on Lady and Strawberry. I'll be careful, Trixie promised. Honey helped her finish all the breakfast dishes, and then they went down to the garden. Trixie showed her how to hill up the potato vines, and after an hour's work, they climbed the path to the miser's mansion. We're going to have one last look around, Trixie told Jim. Why don't you take this flashlight and see what you can find in the cellar? Honey took the other flashlight and carefully inspected the shelves, cupboards, and closets, while Trixie went through the stacks of books. Mr. Frayne might have cut out the pages of one of them, she said, and hid the money in there. Other people have done that. They kept at it till lunchtime, and they were all completely discouraged. Jim washed up at the well and hungrily munched the cold turkey leg Trixie had brought him. There's just one other place, he said, between mouthfuls, the summer house. Now that I've got a flashlight, I can look in there for a trap door or something. That's right, Trixie encouraged him, but I still have a feeling the money, or whatever it is in the living room. Top of 170 now. Well, you're welcome to keep on searching through all that junk as long as you want to. I've given up. Either there isn't any money, or it's hidden too well for me to find it. He grinned. I even went through that barrel of bottle tops this morning. What a mess that was. The girls went home for lunch then, and after Trixie had read Bobby to sleep, she hurried up to the Wheeler stable. Reagan said nothing about his suspicions during the lesson, but afterward, when the girls were helping him groom the horses, he said casually, Thought that big old rambling horse on the other hill. Thought that big old rambling house on the other hill was empty. It is, Trixie said quickly. It belongs to old Mr. Frayne, and he's dying in the hospital. Huh. Reagan pretended to be very busy with his curry comb. I've got a pretty good view of that place from my room over the garage, he said, as though he were talking to himself. Could have sworn I saw somebody roaming around there this morning. Matter of fact, was pretty sure that 2 of the 3 kids I saw were you girls. Trixie and Honey stared at each other behind his back, but said nothing. After a long, nerve-wracking silence, Reagan began again. Ran away from an orphanage myself when I was about that red-headed boy's age. Never regretted it either. Was crazy over horses and finally got a job at a riding school. Learned a lot there, he went on reminiscently. Learned enough anyway, so I can tell right off whether a horse has been ridden or not. He straightened up to face them, his eyes twinkling. Now Jupe here, he had a good gallop yesterday afternoon. No, neither one of you girls could have given him such a workout. Figure that red-headed kid knows how to handle a horse. Ooh, I bet they're feeling nervous now. He's reading their mail, so they say. Reagan's got the down low. Let's see what happens. Trixie held her breath, not daring to look at Honey. Reagan gave Jupiter an affectionate slap. I don't have much time to give you the proper amount of exercise with the boss away, do I, old boy? I'm not likely to say anything if Miss Honey, every now and then, takes you along when she goes off on Strawberry. He laughed. Some people might think it peculiar that she bothers to saddle and bridle you when nobody's going to ride you. But me, I don't aim to ask any question. There's just one thing, though. Trixie's got to promise to stick to lady till I say the word. We'd all get into a lot of trouble if anything happened to Jupe. He placed his hands on his hips, grinning. Is it a deal, girls? Oh, yes, they both cried together. Ooh, so Reagan's ending up being like friendly toward the girls in their misbehavior. It's the old days, right? It's the old days. It's the old book. All right, let's keep reading. We'd like to tell you about it, Reagan, Honey added, but we promise not to. I think you're simply swell to trust us. Well, that's that then. Reagan led Jupiter into his stall. If the kid should get into any trouble, you might let me know. It wasn't so very long ago that I was hiding out in barns myself, wondering where the next meal was coming from. He strolled nonchalantly out of the stable, and Trixie gasped, Gee, isn't he great? Gee, he's great, isn't he, Honey? It was sure lucky nobody else in your house saw us. What a break! Miss Trask is a good sport, too, Honey said loyally, but I'm not sure what she'd do if she knew Jim had run away from home. She's swell, Trixie agreed, but I bet she'd feel she ought to tell the police or try to talk Jim into going back. Let's surprise Jim by leading Jupe up to him tomorrow morning, Honey broke in. We can ride through the bridle trails on the other side of Glen Road. Dad says it's a lovely ride, and if there are any gates, we can open them for you, or you can ride around them. That would be wonderful, Trixie cried enthusiastically. And sometime before Jim goes, let's go for a moonlight ride. The moon's almost full now, so it would be as light as day. Do you think Reagan would let us? I'm pretty sure he would, Honey said. I have a feeling he must have seen Jim and me out riding yesterday afternoon. That's why he's so sure Jim can handle Jupiter. Reagan went off in the forge, you know, and he might have been riding along the back roads and seen us galloping through the fields beyond our property. Anyway, Trixie interrupted, let's bring our lunches tomorrow and have a picnic in the woods. Dad said I deserved a day off, and the garden's practically free of weeds now, so I think Moms would let me go. As Trixie waved goodbye to Honey, she suddenly remembered that Mr. Lytell had said he was riding his old nag through the woods on the opposite side of the road when he saw smoke up at the mansion. Oh, heck, she told herself, that was early in the morning. By the time we start out, he'll be safely behind his counter in the store. She hurried along the path because it was time to feed the chickens, and she could see her father's car turning into the driveway. And even if he should see Jim, she decided, he won't know who he is. He couldn't possibly know everything. And there ends chapter 13. Do you think the girls are going to get found out now? We've got a suspicious general store owner. I'll have to read tomorrow to see if they get found out. All right. talk to you later. Still on the road here to Atlanta.